You guys may remember I told you that RIM and the Real Estate Mortgage Network has a really cool flyer program for loan officers. This is necessary because you loan officers don't go into real estate offices as much as you should. So here's a built-in excuse. They're cool because you can customize them to your company, over to you. It gives you the reason to go into that office and ask for the business. This is Loans 101. If you're not doing this, what are you doing? Click this banner right over there. Alrighty, my friends, so this last week I was at the Mortgage Bankers event in Washington, D.C. Now, the interesting thing is, and this is interesting, things were actually happening. I don't know if I expected that or not. Now, one of which, I was listening to a lawyer speaking about the CFPB case with PHH, while the PHH case was being litigated at the U.S. Court of Appeals at the very same time. I mean, right around the corner. Now, truth be told, I probably should have gone to that, but don't know if it was even an option. In any event, things are getting pretty interesting over there.
First, it appears that the court is concerned about the CFPB's single director structure, whereas the director can only be removed for cause as opposed to simply working at the pleasure of the president.
Means you just can't get rid of them. It gives the director more power. Now, this is what we constantly talk about on our show. That being the CFPB's model comes with too much all-encompassing control under one single person. It's the very whole absolute power corrupts absolutely idea, right? Because the Bureau operates outside of congressional appropriations, so the CFPB can do and does flip Congress and the president the bird and cannot be removed, of course, without cause.
Hey kids, look, a deer!
And the court suggested that this may be unconstitutional. The interesting part is the CFPB had a response, a remedy for the situation. What is that?
I thought this was funny and totally typical of the CFPB, an agency drunk on power. What they suggested is just to invalidate, just kind of scratch out the for cause clause of the Dodd-Frank bill. I mean, just a little white out there, right? And replace it with at the pleasure of, right? That's easy enough. Now, do they have to initial that once they change the document? I mean, you guys understand this, right? Is it a material defect? I mean, because if you did this, fundamentally altering your documents, would that be okay? I mean, legally, would it trigger a buyback?
Now, I don't know how this stuff works, but it's our understanding that the CFPB's job is to enact Dodd-Frank, not to reform it. Because if the CFPB's offering to alter a point in Dodd-Frank, is that not a case of the tail wagging the dog? The singular point is very ironic. It seems the CFPB's offering to overstep its authority by offering to change Dodd-Frank to undermine its authority by serving at the pleasure of the president.
The pleasure and the leisure of the president. It is my pleasure to serve your leisure. Oh, God. Okay, so secondly, and I gotta tell you, this is really the best part. The courts are seemingly questioning the CFPB's interpretation of RESPA. This is twofold, so let us explain.
PHH argued that they were working within the framework that was long-standing and existed with HUD prior to the CFPB taking over enforcement. Of course, the CFPB, and specifically Richard Cordroy, threw those interpretations out the window and started rewriting RESPA interpretation through enforcement actions. Well documented.
You get that, right? Just make stuff up and then go ahead and slap you on the wrist when they do. Well, PHH, they argued that this approach towards RESPA denied them due process, and the courts, well, they seem to agree. Get this.
Judge Kavanaugh analogized the CFPB's sanction of PHH to a police officer saying, "You may cross the street here," but then giving you a $1,000 ticket when you get to the other side.
Bang! Now that's what we're talking about. That's what we've been saying, but now we have a federal judge presiding over the PHH CFPB case who came up with this conclusion all on their own. Now, a judgment has not been rendered and is expected sometime this summer, but one's got to think that this one statement by the presiding judge is very damaging for the CFPB and good for consumers.
Not to mention good for lenders. Now, the third point that seemed to concern the courts is the CFPB throwing out any idea of statute of limitations on enforcement actions they may take in the future. Meaning, even if you were working within HUD's interpretation of RESPA prior to the formation of the CFPB, they may still go after you with their new and different interpretation.
And that totally sucks. Using the judge's analogy, it's like if you had a speed limit of an area that was 35 miles an hour and you did 35, then the next day they moved it to 25 miles an hour and you did 25 miles an hour, you still get a ticket for the previous day. That's what's happening with RESPA, the courts, and the statute of limitations. Now, the court said precedents set back as far as the 1800s said that it's an abomination to have a federal official not bound by the statute be allowed to bring an action decades after the event. Again, good for consumers and good for us.
So in conclusion, the courts have a problem with too much unprecedented power in a singular director, not accountable to the president or Congress, the punitive approach toward RESPA interpretation, and the Bureau's dismissal of statutes of limitations. So are the courts building a case against the existing structure of the CFPB? Sure sounds like it to us.
And here's really what's at stake right now. If they rule against the CFPB, it's widely believed that the structure of the CFPB as we know it today will change, that they won't have the power to go after enforcement as they do now. And as we know, every lender out there is headshot is waiting to get slapped.
Oh,
this
definitely.
will allow them to go forward, lend with more confidence, free up liquidity, and help the housing recovery.
Let's see what happens, man. Let us know your thoughts on this down below. Forward, share, subscribe in the upper right-hand corner, and don't miss our webinar this Thursday, man. Click this banner that says the new referral machine. You don't want to miss it. We'll catch you guys later here at the National Real Estate Post.
Ciao.